In this session, we're going to talk about a simple program. It's listed in the book, so I would suggest you refer to that section for the code. The line numbers, which is something the author brings out, are not part of the program. Most listings, IDEs will have line numbers, but they're not part of the program. We don't type them in. They're there for visual assistance when we want to talk about specific lines of code. It's very difficult to describe a line of code without just repeating exactly what it is. Or we can use a line number, which is really easy. We can say line 5. Every Java program must have at least one class. That's by design, that's the way Java works. Early on, we're going to write programs, they're going to have classes, and we're not going to understand what a class is, what it does, and how to manipulate it. Just accept it. This is the way we have to do it at first. Later on, understanding will come, and it'll be clearer why we're doing that. Now, to run your program, there has to be a starting point, some point at which the Java virtual machine says, I will start here. And that idea is expressed in what's called the main method. That's where execution starts. That's true in C++, C, and Java. That's the way it is. It's a contract between the JVM and the program. The program says start here, and the JVM says I'm looking for main, and I will start there. Now, methods, we'll discuss them later, but what they are named pieces of code that contain one or more programming statements, and the statements often end in a semicolon. The book says all statements end in a semicolon. That's not quite true. It's close. I just want to leave that a little bit open-ended. Methods have names, like the name main. Any valid Java identifier could be used to name a chunk of code. Now, that's a symbolic way of saying when I say that name, technically, when I invoke it from code elsewhere, this group of statements will execute and do something. We don't speak all those statements, we just call it by one name. It's like the title of a book. We don't describe the book by reading it to someone. We speak of its title. That's what a name of a method is. It's like a title for a chunk of code. Keywords make up the control flow and data allocation and various other aspects of the program. These are words that are defined in the Java language specification, and they have very specific meanings. They cannot be used for other purposes. The compiler guarantees that. Keywords specify the structure, and you'll learn about that in its execution flow. You'll learn about that. There are three main types of flow: sequential, selection, and repetition, and we'll discuss all of those. Comments are frequently found in programs, but there's something that the compiler absolutely ignores. It does not care about comments. Comments are things that a programmer writes that are meant to communicate to other humans. It's a programmer to programmer communication. Has nothing to do with the compiler. Curly braces delimit blocks. Now, delimiting is maybe a strange term, but what that means is to set off a boundary, set the limit. The braces, an open curly brace and a closed curly brace, set off or mark a block. And a method is a type of block. After the name of the method and its parameter list, there'll be an open brace. When the method's finished, there's a closed brace. And that means everything between it is the body of that method. You don't have to understand that fully right now, but just understand curly braces set off a block. The most common blocks include class, method, loop, and compound statement blocks. We will experience all of these as we move forward. So if you see braces, open and close braces, understand they're syntactical elements that are required in the program to delimit or set off the boundaries of a block, be it class, method, or other. They are required, and they help you read and abstract out some of the meaning of the program. As should be expected, failing to follow syntax rules results in compiler errors. The compiler will say that code you wrote either doesn't make sense or it's ambiguous, and you have to fix it before the compiler will generate any code. Now, identifiers, which I mentioned before, are syntactically correct names that a programmer gives to certain program elements, such as class or method names, variables, etc. Basically, it's those symbols that I talked about that are human language like that programmers use in which terms programmers think about their program. The compiler will convert those symbolic identifiers into numbers that the machine understands. Each identifier will have its own number or in some way use numbers. Be grateful you are allowed to think symbolically while the machine does all that number thinking.